Okay, so we would like to submit our application for the Supreme Court Committee of Harvard Model Congress Europe for Hugo Harvey
and Phil Root
from the School of Ecole Jeannine Manuel.
We would like to address the issue of campaign financing.
So, in 1787, the Philadelphia Convention first drafted the United States Constitution, with the first three words, "We the people," signifying that the government to come would be representative of its people, as it would be elected by its people, comprised of its people, and try to serve its people. So as we can see, this phrase that is so iconic in American society represents the democracy and democratic institutions of America. However, these foundational values of America have recently been jeopardized by what's arguably the most important Supreme Court case of our time. Campaign financing has long been an issue in America, as it affects elections unfairly. And it's the ability to fund political campaigns, policy initiatives, and promotions of candidates. Campaign finance reform, which was sought after by so many for so long, was brought about by Congress in 2004 through the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act. And what this act did was to put limits on how much private corporations could give to political campaigns. This was the first step to the restoration of fair elections and fair democratic institutions in the United States. However, it was short-lived, as in 2011, the Supreme Court case Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission overruled the act. Citizens United, the Political Action Committee, or PAC, decided to make a critical movie of a presidential candidate at the time, Hillary Clinton. And they got taken to court for it. But Citizens United appealed to the Supreme Court after the district court claimed that their actions were in violation of the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act. The Supreme Justices decided, however, that the act passed by Congress was unconstitutional, as political spending is a form of protected speech under the First Amendment, and therefore government cannot keep corporations or unions from denouncing or promoting candidates. So the overruling of an act that had taken so long to be passed meant that the reform that was so demanded no longer had any grounding. And although this may seem like a technicality, it had drastic implications on the way elections play out.
Now, I'm going to be talking about the repercussions and the ramifications of that Supreme Court verdict. First and foremost, what it did was that it sent out a message to the wealthiest of the wealthiest people in society. Hey, you own most of the economy, now we're going to let you buy the government as well. Because effectively, that's what this verdict was doing. And since then, unprecedented amounts of money have been donated to campaigns. A year before the verdict, when donations by super PAC were capped at $5,000, only $62 million were donated by super PACs. A year after the verdict, when there were no limitations whatsoever, that number rose to nearly $828 million. That's nearly 12 times the amount. Allowing private entities to fund campaigns and decide the political success of a candidate means that these same candidates are going to want to appeal to those special interest groups, whether it's unions, corporations, PACs, or super PACs. And of course, when these corporations get the candidate that they want into office, the candidate they paid for to get into office, they're going to be expecting something in return. And that becomes problematic because this mafia-like process is stopping the representatives that the American people are putting into office from making decisions that are going to benefit society as a whole. Suppose that Americans, for a second, are going to want healthcare reform. Thing is, as long as health insurance companies are the main proponents keeping candidates in office, these candidates are going to have a lot less incentive. These representatives are going to have a lot less incentive to help society as a whole. And rather, these congressmen, these senators, these presidents are going to be beholden to health insurance companies' demands. To sum it up, these representatives, whether they're senators, congressmen, or presidents, they're going to want to act in the best interest of the industries that keep them in office rather than the American people they're supposed to represent. And the thing is, this broken system favors a few rather than the many that democracy is supposed to. It helps the rich get richer while leaving the poor defenseless and helpless. The word democracy itself comes from the Greek, meaning power to the people, and right now, they don't have it. If the Supreme Court continues to acknowledge that money is power, and that corporations are equivalent to people, then they honestly never will.
If the United States is ever going to hope to maintain its claim that it's a working representative democracy, it is going to need to implement reforms. The first step to solving any problem is to recognize that there is one. But how can we hope for the people who can solve the problem to acknowledge that there is one if they're directly benefiting from it? This is the paradox of American democracy. Thank you for listening and your consideration.